Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Debbie Weiss of Belmont, New Jersey bound, who is joining me from Lebanon, New Jersey. Debbie is a best-selling author, speaker, podcast host, and longtime family caregiver who has navigated profound loss and knows firsthand what it means to start over. After decades of prioritizing others, she embarked on her own journey of growth, discovering how small shifts could bring color, purpose, and fulfillment back into her life. Through her two inspiring books titled On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, and The Sprinkle Effect, Debbie encourages women to take small, intentional steps towards a more vibrant, fulfilling life. And her books are a lifeline for those ready to stop drifting and start living with purpose. Her approachable style and actionable guidance empower women in midlife to shake things up and start making positive changes, one sprinkle at a time. I'm looking forward to talking with Debbie about her extraordinary journey shaped by over 40 years as a caregiver and profound personal loss, which led to her inspiring transformation into a life of renewed purpose. Debbie's story powerfully echoes the mission of Grief and Rebirth podcast, whose inspiring role models have navigated life's most difficult transitions, healed, and transformed lives. We're also going to explore the powerful turning point Debbie experienced at age 50 that became a catalyst for change and uncover how Debbie turned adversity into empowerment by launching her own business, writing her two uplifting books, and speaking. Debbie's journey is a poignant reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your future and make meaningful shifts, even in the face of grief, loss, and major life transition. I could not agree more.
Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, Debbie. A warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much, Irene. And just like you said before we came on, I am blushing after listening to that whole story. I'm listening, going, "Is that really me? Wow!"
Feel free to use it.
I will.
Well, I always say I really like researching the people I'm interviewing because I want people to know how special you are, that they're not just listening to a random opinion or whatever, that you really have expertise and that they can learn a lot from you. And you have quite a story that there are parts of it that I can relate to about being a caregiver and all of that. So let's talk about the beginnings of Debbie. You had an early childhood. I hear you were chubby, insecure, and scared. And you spent your life doing what was expected of you and taking care of everyone but yourself. Tell us about the set of beliefs you inherited from your upbringing that kept you living a life you didn't love. Tell us about Debbie. Debbie.
Boy, just thinking about it, it's so amazing. It doesn't matter what age you are. When you put yourself back in those moments, you can still feel those feelings that you felt. And so, as you said, I was a chubby little girl, and I've actually had a lifelong weight struggle. And I really have memories as early as preschool age of feeling judged and not good enough because of the way I looked. And I have some stories. Actually, I write about several of them in, the memoir, about how difficult it was and how, it wasn't just kids bullying me, it was adults as well. I can't tell you how many times I heard adults say to my parents, "Oh, she has such a pretty face." and you know that they're just not saying, it's such a shame that her body looks like that with that pretty face. It's one of those, I don't know if it's a backhanded
By the
compliment,
way,
right?
I wasn't related to you, but in my world, I've heard things like that since also. Like that.
Yeah. Well, and then as a kid, when I felt like I was constantly being judged, I never wanted to put myself out there. I was extremely insecure. And I just wanted to make everybody else happy. I didn't feel like I was worthy because, I didn't maybe look the same as the other little girls. And the thing I had going for me is that I was a good student. And so that's kind of was my lane. But anything else, when it wasn't having to do with schoolwork, I was completely insecure, did not want to be seen. I mean, my brother is 4 years younger than I am. And even when even honestly, as old as like 17, I was still afraid to go into a store and ask a question.
Wow.
I would say, or go into a store or fast food and order something. I would send my brother in. And I was sending my brother in when he was 6 and I was 10. He never had a problem. He would go and do and talk to anyone.
Because he was a boy and he was perfect.
Yep.
Was that part of that?
Yeah, and he didn't have weight problem.
Well, yeah, right.
So,
was your weight problem because they were feeding you? Or just your body built?
It wasn't. My mother would always share this story that the pediatrician, when I was 6 months old, said she's gaining weight too quickly. You have to switch her to skim milk.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yes, did I emotionally abuse food? Absolutely. Was I doing it at 2? No. I don't believe so. So I don't think that it was anything.
You just inherited some genes.
Oh, yeah. Well, so the thing is that my immediate family, when I was growing up, not now that I'm older, but when I was growing up, my parents were both slim. My brother was a string bean, and there was me that didn't belong in this family. But each of my parents each had one sibling. And so both of their siblings on both sides had weight problems. And all my cousins had weight problems. And I was like, I don't belong in this family because these people that I'm living with, they don't get it. They don't know what it feels like, how horrible it is. And so my mother, since she didn't struggle, didn't really understand. And so she saw how unhappy I was. So she's like taking me to Weight Watchers when I'm 10 years old. And, I don't want to say depriving me, but kind of, she was depriving me of, she would like quietly cut a piece of cake for my brother and say, take it in the other room so your sister doesn't see. And food, like treats kind of food, were hidden all over my house. And they were hidden from me. So if I found them, what would I do? I would take that box of cookies and I would say to myself, I'm only going to eat a few. And all of a sudden there was only 2 left. And then I would put them back in the hiding spot. And then the Inquisition would come. There's only 2 cookies left. Who ate these? Who ate these? Debbie, did you eat these? Again, I know now that they weren't trying to shame me or make me feel bad about myself. Like, they didn't know how to help and they didn't know what I was feeling. And so
in today's world, maybe they would have seen someone to talk to a professional about how to deal with their feelings about it also, let alone how to talk to you about it. It was a different day and age, but some of us still have those experiences, right? But I think more people are enlightened today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank goodness.
So that was really hurting you. So this message influenced you to kind of hide, right? Behind caregiving. That was where you found a purpose and where you were needed, right?
Exactly. It's funny because I don't think I realized it then, but as you said in the intro, my father had a massive stroke the day after I graduated from high school. I was 17 and he survived. Thankfully, he survived. He was only just turned 46, like days before had turned 46.
Wow, what a shock.
I know. And, it was out of left field. Back then, a 46-year-old having this kind of stroke, we didn't know
he
what.
wasn't overweight or anything.
No.
So where did that come from?
No, I mean, he had hypertension and cholesterol issues and all of that, but it was not weight related. It was not a weight issue at all. And my parents had been separated a few years earlier. And so I don't think their marriage was in the best place at the time. And my mom was only 39. And it was clear that he was going to be permanently disabled. And his speech wasn't really affected. It was the stroke was on the other side of the brain. But his personality changed. And it became evident that he wasn't going to be able to work and he wasn't the same person. And so basically my mother decided to get divorced. And so that kind of just, shoved me in that role as caregiver.
Someone had to take care of you. She didn't want to do it, right? So
yes,
split onto you.
Yes. And with my brother being 4 years younger, I mean, when I'm 17, he's 13. He's not caregiving. I didn't have any idea what I was in for, but I was always daddy's little girl. And I just knew it was my mission, my responsibility to make sure that he was okay. And so he's lived for 30 years. So for 30 years, I was his caregiver. He lived in different, I guess what you would now call independent living facilities. Back then, that was another thing that was very different. These places just did not exist as they do today. And so we were in Long Island and my mother couldn't find a place in Long Island. So he wound up moving to New Jersey. And so, but then I was far away from him, right? So I was always trekking to New Jersey on the weekends. I was taking him to doctor's appointments. I'm paying his bills.
So they had a place for him to be in New Jersey as opposed to Long Island.
At the time, yes, there was nothing in Long Island. And over the 30 years, I had to, for money reasons, because money was an issue, being that age, not, my father being that age, he didn't have, any great savings to draw from. Luckily, he had long-term disability and Social Security, but those two things were his only income. And so as time went on, they weren't enough. And so then that became a financial piece. And let's just suffice it to say, for 30 years, I dealt with a lot of different
had
things.
No life. You basically were catering to him.
Yes. And you know what? So let me just say, when I was in my early 20s, when it first kind of, all really came to be, it was a little bit empowering, yet scary. And I didn't realize that it made me feel good about myself, because now people were saying, oh, look at what Debbie's doing. Oh, look at how she's taking care of her dad and she's sacrificing and all the things. Also looking back, it helped me to gain a little bit of confidence, because even though I won't go in a store at that time and ask a question, I was not going to let that insecurity affect what my father needed. So I had to get brave enough to question a doctor, to ask questions of people and advocate for him. Because even if I was not comfortable advocating for myself, I was too uncomfortable with the idea that I was doing him a disservice.
Right.
And it helped me find my voice.
I
really
can
did.
understand that. So you were the fixer and the problem solver for about yourself.
Oh.
What was that powerful turning point you experienced at age 50? And it took you to 50 doing all this.
Well, it took me to 50. And let me just add a little more of the caregiving, is that when I went through a ton of infertility struggle and 6 in vitro fertilization
procedures. Did you have time with all of this to meet your husband?
Oh my gosh, please. Yeah. Thank goodness my husband, because my father would do and say some crazy stuff. He was a lot. And I was very grateful that my husband, he was great about it. And my brother, actually, when he grew up, he wound up moving away. So my brother was never really hands-on, never involved. I mean, my husband would shave my father. He would he did everything for him. So I'm very grateful that, he was very understanding and caring. But when we did have our children at the age of 2, my oldest was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And then he soon later added ADHD and depression and anxiety. And so when he was first diagnosed, my dad was alive. My dad passed away when my oldest son was 10 and brought on another form of caregiving. Very different from what I was dealing with my dad. This, as a mom, when your child has any kind of problem, issue, whatever it is, right? Especially as moms, we like turn into mama bear, and I had to fix him. And that became my sole mission. And so with my dad, I learned a whole set of stuff, learning about Medicare and Medicaid when I'm in my 20s, when you don't even know what Social Security is. And now I had to learn all about autism and all about the different modalities that were out there, because again, it was a different time than it is today. Thankfully, things have come so much further in that field with an awareness. In my case, they handed us a brochure and said, good luck.
Oh my God.
Yep. So
that is such a difficult situation.
Yeah, it was extremely, extremely difficult. And then simultaneously, my dad's health was declining. So it was all kind of coming to a head at once.
I mean, I had put a lot of stress, strain on your marriage, on your relationships, everything.
Everything, because it was all about everyone else and where I was running and where I was spending money, trying to do whatever I could to help my son and my business. So I'm an insurance agent as well. And my husband and I worked together. So that was good and bad that came along with that. And so, yes, then I'm worried about my customers. I'm worried about my team members. And I'm worried about my son, my older son, and then my younger son. What about him? And of course, my dad, and, all the things and all the people except for yourself.
Wow.
And I think so many women are like that. I don't think that I am, unique in that way at all. It's just really the circumstances that all came together and started from an early age.
Yeah. So tell us about this catalyst for change. So you came to.
Yep. So
what happened one day? You came to a point you said enough?
Well, yes and no. I don't remember it being like, the heavens opening up and the angels singing. It's not that kind of epiphany. It was kind of like a slow burn epiphany. But my dad passed away about a year or so before I turned 50. So when I turned 50, he was already gone. But I was at a place where I didn't realize how burnt out I was. I was always so stressed. Always, you looked at me cross-eyed and I was screaming at you, or my kids would say something and I responded in an inappropriate way because it was all of that brewing.
You were constantly being triggered?
Yep. I had like physical manifestations of the stress. My eyes started twitching. I had heart palpitations.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, what it was. And I thought to myself, I have so much to be grateful for. What's wrong with you? Like why are you even, you're being spoiled like a spoiled brat. You live in a nice house. You're so lucky to have your health, so many things that I'm so lucky to have. And then that makes you kind of, I think like that, it kind of says to myself, not that I don't deserve happiness, but look at how much you already have. Like, how much more do you want? But when I turned 50, there was something about the number 50, like that really hit me. I didn't feel that way at 40. I didn't even feel that way at 60. It was 50. Wow. These 50 years went so quickly. I saw my father die with tons of regret. I listened to my mother always talking about the things that she regretted. And I thought, if I were to die today, would I have regrets? And I said, yeah, I would. And it wasn't like I could say, oh, I always wanted to be a singer and I didn't pursue that. Like I didn't have some specific thing in mind that I haven't done, accomplished, tried, none of that. I just knew something inside me says, there just has to be more. There just has to be some kind of purpose, some kind of something that makes my life feel more meaningful, more fulfilling. I didn't know what it was. And my friends took me away for the weekend when I turned 50. We went to Bermuda and I really protested and said, I can't leave my husband with the kids. And But they insisted. And from the moment we met at the airport, we just started laughing. And when they would ask me, well, what do you want to do for dinner? It was almost like I was looking over my shoulder, like, is someone asking me what I want? I have no idea what I want. And, we had a conversation that turned a little heavy of, what are our goals and dreams for the rest of our lives? And I could say what they were for my kids, but not for myself personally. And in that moment, I realized nothing's going to change. Like, no fairy godmother is coming down and waving her magic wand and saying, oh, here you go, Debbie. Here's your new life. If something had to change, it had to be from me. I didn't know how, I didn't know what, I didn't know anything. But I just knew that if I remained complacent and just kind of went along with the things that life were throwing at me and wasn't more proactive, that the next 50 years would be gone in a minute, and there I would be, that person saying, how did this happen?
And I had lots of regrets.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So you came upon a mindset shift that said, maybe I can.
Yes.
It changed your life. Tell us about maybe I can.
So when I came back from the trip and I said, okay, something's got to give. Where do I start? And I knew at that point it had to be my weight, because I was 100 pounds overweight then. And that had definitely grown into that number because of the stress, because that then I was using food as my emotional outlet. But I thought to myself, you know what? Over the years, I have gained and lost, over 1,000 pounds, as so many people who struggle with lifelong weight problems had. I got to do something different. What am I going to do differently? Because in the past, what I've done, clearly, I might have lost the weight, but then I gained it back. So that's not success. So I said, I'm going back to Weight Watchers for the umpteenth time, but I'm going to do something a little different. I am going to not go and say, okay, I need to lose 25 pounds in 3 months or by the summer or by my birthday. Otherwise, I'm a failure. I'm just going to go and I'm going to just do one little thing. And I decided I'm just going to go to the meetings. I'm not going to care about how much I eat or exercise or any of the other I'm just showing up. That's it. That is my one goal. And that's all I did for a couple of months. I showed up. I probably gained 3 or 4 pounds in that 3-month period, but I felt proud of myself because I did what I set out to do.
Well, and you were doing something for you.
Yes.
This time you were doing it for you.
Yes. And something shifts, right? When you're older. Early on, it's like, oh, I don't feel good about myself in my clothes. It's all about your looks. But then when you're in your 50s, you're like, well, heck, I want to live a long life. And it turns more about health. So anyhow, I just continued on that path. And 3.5 years later, I had lost 90 pounds. Now, 3.5 years, that's a long time when you want to feel like that weight should be gone right away. But with those slow changes, that's when the mindset started to shift. The biggest aha there was, this is not a diet. This is, if you want to live a long life, if you want to be healthy, you're not going off this. You have to figure out what works for you in the long term. It doesn't mean you're not going to eat ice cream and pizza and all the things that you love again, but you're not going to eat them every day, and you're not going to eat them in quantity and all this stuff. And so over time, where I always felt, since it was 50 years of weight struggle that I had never been able to get past, it was always, I can't do that. I can't do that. Everything in my life up to that point, and it could have been the smallest thing. It could have been, do you want to learn how to knit? Oh, I can't knit. No, really? I can't knit. Wow. I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. My first answer was always, I can't do that. I can't do that. Now I know that was, I thought, keeping me safe, right? Because I was afraid. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of looking dumb because I was afraid of being judged, because I didn't feel good enough, all the things. And so I stayed in my safe little box, but where was that getting me? Oh. And so if I stopped after I said I can't and waited a few beats, right? That's where on second thought, well, wait a second. Why not? Maybe I can. How do I know? I'll never know unless I try. If I don't try, I'm going to stay in this little box And my life's going to continue on the same exact path that it's been on. And so over the past decade, I've learned that when I say maybe I can, and then yes, I can, and I give it a try, sometimes I fail. Even failing feels good because I can look back and say, okay, that wasn't for you, but now you know. And look at you.
Right.
You tried.
At least you went and at least you walked in.
Yep.
And you went. I once was after I was grieving tremendously after the car accident, and a therapist said to me, "I want you just to go in. She wanted me to eat by myself at a restaurant." I said, "I can't do that. I've always done everything with my husband. I can't do that." She said, "I want you to go in. I want you to sit at the table. I want you to bring a book. And if you can't handle it, you can always walk out, but you need to walk in that with her and start." That's what you were doing, right?
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
I can. Maybe I can walk through that door. So tell us about how this led to your memoir and all the things that you did to be able to write a memoir called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. Rewrote the rules and designed a life that finally fits for you, which is amazing. And you pulled out one small shift, one bold decision, one sprinkle at a time. And you wrote this book while your husband was dying. So tell us about all that.
So I had been on, I had started that journey around the age of 50, and I had taken a lot of steps that led me down a lot of different paths. Like I said, some worked out, some didn't. And when I got to the point where I realized I had a message to share that could help people, it was like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to share this message? Like, am I going to stand on my roof out here in New Jersey and everybody's going to hear me? Yeah, right. Exactly. Screaming, listen to me. So people kept, you got to listen to the whispers, right? And so I was really tuned in. It seemed like it kept coming up. People kept saying, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. I said, write a book? I don't know how to write a book. Like, I'm a math girl. I am a numbers girl. That's where I excel. Not with words. That's not my jam. What do? Do you open up a notebook and say my book and just start writing? I had it in my head, but I really didn't think that I could do it or would do it. And one day I was listening to a podcast I didn't always tune into, and they were interviewing a woman who helped first-time authors get their stories out there. And I was listening, and I really liked her from listening to her. And I said, okay, you're at least going to contact her and see what she's all about. And I did, and I really connected with her. She made me feel good that I had a story to share because I wasn't really sure that I had a story that would be impactful.
She validated you.
Yes, exactly. She did. And she said, I'm starting a small group coaching session for people who want to get their stories out there, the first time authors. And I was so scared because I had so many limiting beliefs around this. And I was contemplating it, and I was just about to sign up. And out of the blue, my husband received a terminal cancer diagnosis. Now, for about 3 years prior to that, he had been suffering from various both physical and mental illnesses. He actually had just 6 weeks earlier gotten out of a hospitalization for depression.
Wow.
And he was doing so well. And this came out of the blue.
Talk about pulling the rug out from under you. Wow.
I mean, just when he had, come through the depression and was hopeful, and this happens. And after the diagnosis, I was speaking to a therapist. I was seeing a therapist at the time. And I said, I'm even embarrassed to be mentioning this. But, I was thinking about this course, but obviously this is not the right time to do it. I don't know what's going to happen, family first and all of the things. And she said, well, I disagree with you. This is the perfect time. And I thought she was crazy, honestly. And I said, what do you mean the perfect time? I don't know. Will he be hospitalized? I have all the unknowns, right? And she said, I was nervous. What if I can't show up to the group 1 week? What if there's homework and I don't do the homework? There's my little A student coming back into life. And she said, who cares?
That's really.
I thought, wow, I guess. So I did it. And
Talk about a mindset shift.
oh my goodness, unbelievable. The first month or two, it was a struggle because it was difficult for me. It was difficult for me to understand how this works. And I had so many questions. But once I kind of at least had a roadmap of what I was going to do and the stories that I was going to share, then I was very intentional about every day scheduling some time to write, whether it was before he woke up, whether he was in the hospital and I brought my computer and my stuff with me. And when he was sleeping or went down for a test, I wrote in the hospital, if he was home, whatever. I sometimes it didn't work, but most of the time it did. Sometimes it was for 10 minutes and others for an hour. And I have to say that even though the writing process was difficult, I looked forward to that time. And when I got to a certain point, and a lot of it has to do with word count. And when I got to like 10,000 words, it was the first time that I thought, you know what? Maybe I can finish this book.
Wow.
Because I didn't, even when I started, I thought, oh yeah, my goal is to finish this at the end of the course. And I was really thinking, that's not happening. But when I got to that point, I started believing. And then it really became my focus, and it saved me because she was exactly right. It was something just for me that took me out of the horribly difficult time that all of us were living through. And when he died, I was 3 chapters shy of finishing.
Wow, that's amazing. And then you got to a second book called The Sprinkle Effect. So what transpired to bring you to number 2? And that obviously is a reflection on you because it's about a dynamic and uplifting approach to personal transformation, right?
Yep. So one of the things that I learned taking the course is I had to figure out, well, what is the first book going to be? What genre? And I learned really the difference between a memoir and a biography and a self-help book. And so I made a conscious decision that my first book would have no self-help anything. It literally is a compilation of stories that together make one inspirational story. But then after that came out, people said, well, wait a second, that's great, but what the heck did you do? How did you make that transformation? And I said, okay. And then that's when I said, I have to write a second book that, tells people what I did. And that's where the Sprinkle Effect came in.
So please explain to us what it's like to infuse your life with purposeful sprinkles of growth and enhancing qualities like resilience, courage, and discipline that made your challenges more manageable, all new behaviors on your part. And instead of allowing routine, which your life is spoken routine, to shape your days. So explain to us that and how you translate that to others.
It was hard actually to realize when people said to me, well, what did you do? Sometimes you're doing it and you don't have that clarity of, well, what did I really do? But then when I looked back, it wasn't one thing, right? It was a compilation of all different things. And so in the book, there's 15 different sprinkles, and there are things like a sprinkle of belief, of mindset, of discipline, resilience, joy, all of the things. So little sprinkles of different qualities, different ideas that you add into your life one at a time so that it's not overwhelming. It grows to be something colorful and fulfilling. And so I think that I know every day now, when I wake up, it is completely different feeling than I used to feel. Before, it was like on the hamster wheel, right? What do I have to do today? I got to go to work. Oh boy, I might have to go food shopping. I have laundry to do, yada, yada. And then you flop on the couch and binge something until you fall asleep and get up and do it again. And now, even though I still go to work and I still have to food shop and I still have to do all the things, right? I have something else to look forward to, or I am now deciding how I want my days to look. I am now deciding what people I see, what direction I want to go in. I am the captain of my ship. I mean, like you said before, it really is that. I think that the analogy to me, or when I can envision an image in my mind, it's just drifting. You're in a boat and you're just drifting. and you're letting the current take you wherever it might take you. And that's what I was doing before, because before my father had a stroke. That's, the current moving in one direction. So this is what I need to do. And then this happened and this happened. And so I felt that I had no choice. And I felt that since these difficult things happened in my life, that determined the outcome of my life. Poor me. This happened and this happened and this happened. And we can all say poor me, right? They're all different things that happened. That's life. It happens to all of us. And I was not taking any responsibility. I was just letting that current take me instead of me saying, okay, this happened. Am I going to let that drown me? Am I going to let that throw me off course? And again, I really want to be clear. I didn't know the course. I still don't know exactly what the course is. I am just kind of following the little nudges
That's right.
that I'm getting.
Step by step by step by step.
That's it. Little sprinkles at a time.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I know that you also created a workbook so that, especially for those navigating grief or major life transitions, because it inspires inspiration. It offers inspiration and practical tools to rediscover purpose, reclaim joy, and take empowered steps. So tell us about the Sprinkle Effect of the book, which guides women to embrace life's possibilities, which I have to tell you, I personally know so many women who could use this. Like, they're stuck in their routine and there's no light coming through to them.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I have to say, I was one of those people who would read a self-help book, personal development book, and then at the end of the chapter, to ask you these questions or have you do these activities. And I'd be like, yeah, I don't need to do that. Let me just go on to chapter 3 and 4 and 5, and I'm going to skip that stuff.
Right.
Or it would say, write it down, but I'd be like, well, let me just think about the answer. That's good. And I'd rush on. I must harp on this in the book that was such a big mistake. And anybody who's just going to read the Sprinkle Effect or any book like that comes with the activities and the exercises, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're reading it for a reason. You want what you learn to actually impact you and help you make that change in whatever area you want to make that change. It's not going to happen just by reading. And you have to do the work. And I never understood, well, what is this do the work, quote unquote, that people talk about? And the work is really looking within. And so at the end of each chapter, I have activities and a journal prompt. And so the workbook is really honestly just taking those activities and journal prompt and putting them all in one place, because anytime I did take the time to do an activity, I'd grab a random piece of paper or, a notebook over here. And then, 2 days later, I wouldn't remember that, this is putting it all in one cohesive place, that you have it to look back on, to remind yourself of, what you were thinking, what you said you were going to do, that kind of thing, that you can use it as kind of your own roadmap, because my roadmap isn't your roadmap and so on and so forth. You've got to create your own, and you only do it by taking the time to tap into yourself.
Right. Well, as I listen to you, I keep hearing and I feel like the words keep moving. Like what you're doing is you're inspiring them to not become complacent. Right? You're helping people not to become complacent and become conscious, to really think about, what am I doing with my life?
Exactly.
Which is so important. And another important thing you talk about, which I really love, is about taking responsibility for recognizing that and I love that you put it this way, that each of us holds the steering wheel in our life's journey, which is more of what we're talking about, connected to navigating life's ups and downs with confidence and purpose. But talk to us about responsibility and how it is related to making these important choices in life, which we're talking about conscious choices to move forward.
Exactly. I didn't know that I was living in what's called a victim mentality. And when I heard that and I heard the definition and I was honest, because this is the hardest part, right? It's hard to look in the mirror and say, I think I have been playing the victim, because on the outside, I wasn't. I was never a Debbie Downer. I was even, through everything, I would typically show up as an upbeat, happy person. So to then think that I was a victim, but I did. I thought I was a victim. And I'll share with you what really for me made the change, because sometimes you have to hear somebody explain things so many different ways. You never know what's going to resonate with you. So what resonated with me was when I learned this formula from Jack Canfield's The Success Principles, E plus R equals O. Because as I said, I'm a math girl, so I like formulas. So E is the event, R is your reaction, and O is the outcome. So the event plus the way you react equals your outcome. I didn't know there was an R. I just thought my husband died. This sucks, right? I'm not saying that that was a good thing. And I'm not saying that my reaction is to just say, oh, no big deal. But I have a choice then what I want that outcome to be. Do I want to allow the fact that I became a widow at 59 to chart the course for the rest of my life? Do I want to sit with that sadness or that victim mentality? Like, why me? Why, I look at my friends, they still have their husbands. I never wanted this to be me. Why is this happening to me? And even though, of course, those are normal reactions, right? And feelings, and they shouldn't be avoided. They should be felt. But it doesn't mean that that's all there is for the rest of my life. And so that's where the R comes in. If I don't take responsibility for how I react and for my actions, then the outcome I have no control over.
You go back to the old way.
Yeah.
And there's another R word that I want to talk to you about. It's called resilience. And you talk about that too. It's so important, and not enough people have it. It's the ability. I have a favorite expression. It's called, the only thing in life that doesn't change is everything changes.
Exactly.
Right?
So
resilience is the ability to adapt and recover from adversity, stress, or significant life change. So you personally built resilience after your husband transitioned. And so talk to us about how resilience requires us to put ourselves, that's a whole big new concept, putting yourself first.
Yes.
And the additional ways you can build resilience.
When I look back, I think my life experience helped build resilience, right? And I think that happens in all of us because we all have faced adversity. I can go back to being 3 years old and feeling, that was adversity, right? And so I think over time, just naturally, we become more resilient. One of the things that I learned to do was to create what I call a maybe I can list. And I have it in the notes app in my phone. And I went back and made a list of all the things that I thought I could never survive.
Really
right?
interesting.
Remind myself, oh yeah, when I was engaged when I was 21 and he cheated on me. And I remember I thought I'll never get past this. But you know what? I did. And I got past it when my father had the stroke. And even, smaller disappointments or things that were difficult to navigate. And you start making a list and you're like, you know what? It reminds you of all the times that you thought that you would never be able to move on. You would never get past this, but you did. And any time that you feel that it's too much, you go back and you open that app or that piece of paper and read it and remind yourself that you are resilient. You can do this. You've done it before and you can continue to do it. So
you are enough. And
you are enough. You are enough. And I think for me, so many times, even with the, maybe I can, my mindset was always, well, you know what? If that person can do it, why not me? Why not? And that kind of spurs me. I can even think back to being so scared to giving birth the first time, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awful. You hear all the horror stories and it wasn't pleasant. I'm not saying that it was, but I thought to myself, billions of women have survived this before me. I can do it too. And that I think is the idea of what you're doing is showing people, yes, I've been through the worst. I got through it. And I'm getting through it, and you can too. And I think that, those things are very, very helpful. And I think with the resilience piece, and self-care, that when you realize it's not selfish, it's okay.
Wow.
And not only is it not selfish, it's imperative, because going back to when my life was spinning out of control with my father and my son, you know what? I wasn't taking care of myself, and I was not showing up as my best self to my family, to those I was caring for. As I said, I was a ball of stress and I was blowing up and screaming. And, what good is that?
But you know what? But you've become, for what you're talking about, you're a marvelous role model. When you talk about the sprinkle effect, when you talk about the different things that you're suggesting they do, you've done it.
Yes.
And you're a tremendous role model for it. You can do this and be scared all the way, because I was too.
It doesn't mean that you don't miss your loved one, or that you wish things were different, before whatever that trauma was. You know what? They're not. But someday, even though it's hard to see in that moment, you're going to look back and say, it changed me, and you want to have it change you in a positive way. It doesn't mean you would want your husband to die again, right? God forbid. You don't want this car accident to happen. Of course not. But it did. And so now you have a choice how you move forward after that moment.
The mindset.
Yep.
The mindset change.
It's all in your head.
That's all in your head. Deb, also, tell me, please, why is healing? You say the healing is a deeply personal journey, where instead of moving through the pain, we learn to live with it in a way that doesn't control us. That is a lot of good guidance for people. You want to talk about that? Because
Yeah.
we all have pain.
We all have pain, right? And especially with grief, you think you're never over it, right? It just changes. It just changes, and it hits you at times that you think you're fine. And the smallest thing, it doesn't matter, a look, a song, a picture, a memory, whatever it is. And I think that the idea that I have gotten through the worst, in those moments in the beginning, when you're in shock, when you're in that real initial state of grief, and it just feels like your life will never be normal again. And it won't be. It won't be the same normal that it was. It will always change. It will always change. And allowing, I know for me, I didn't realize that oftentimes I wasn't allowing myself to feel the feelings, right? Because
pain hurts.
Pain hurts. Pain hurts. And, there's where the emotional eating came from. There's where better to stuff it down, not feel the things. But when I realized it's okay to feel the things, it's imperative to feel the things, right? Because otherwise you are not healing. You are just staying stuck. And the healing doesn't stop.
And it actually, when you say learn to live with the pain in a way it doesn't control us, if you don't heal, it's going to control you.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
Yes.
And what is the famous Debbie Weiss tip for finding joy in life?
Oh my goodness. Well, talking to you. Honestly, it is. It honestly is. I always am amazed. One, well, of course, that I wrote books is just still blows my mind. But two, if I think about, who I was, when I started doing this, when I started, speaking professionally, speaking on podcasts, doing all the things, my mother and my brother were like, you have got to be kidding me. If anybody knew who you used to be, that you have now become this person who's putting yourself out there, who's doesn't shut up. Not that I was always a talker, but that was like, behind closed doors with the people who knew me well, certainly not in public kind of thing. Just that realization that through doing something that's scary, because it was super scary when I started speaking and writing and all, and there's a lot of stuff in both those books that are almost shameful and very embarrassing and was very difficult for me to put out there because of that fear of being judged. But I told myself I'm doing it to help other people. And so when you ask me what brings me joy, this conversation.
You've gotten to this place.
Yes. And that because of it, and I'm going on too long about this, but I just got to tell you one thing. When I was writing the memoir, I have this shameful money story that nobody, I mean, my closest friends and family had no idea. Nobody knew. It was something I've lived with for years.
Well,
And I didn't put it in the book. And one day, I don't remember what I was doing. It might have been like something like meditating or something like that. And it came to me, I have to tell my whole truth. Because if my goal is to help other people see themselves in my story, to know that it's okay, that we all make mistakes, that we've all, done things that we're not proud of. If I don't share what I'm not proud of, this painful mistake, then I'm not being authentic. I'm not being 100% authentic. I'm only being authentic sharing the stuff I'm okay sharing.
and you can't be a full role model unless you
No.
admit your stuff and tell them, if I know you're struggling with this, but I've been there too.
Exactly.
And look at where I came through. The other thing you talk about is that starting a gratitude practice. That's
Oh, yeah.
joy. You want to talk with people about that?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things actually to talk about, because when I first, started this journey and I would hear all these things about a gratitude practice, and I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. Like, this is really something that, people made up. It sounds really good. Of course, I'm grateful for my family and my dog and my house and my job, like all the things. So what is this practice? Every day I'm just going to say I'm thankful for all these things and this is going to change my life. Like, I literally thought it was nonsense. And then a friend of mine sent me a gratitude journal as a gift. And I was so irritated because I thought, oh my gosh, look at this dumb thing. Now I'm going to have to do this because she was nice enough to send me the journal. She's going to ask me. So in the journal, every morning it would ask like 5 different questions. And, one of the things is, what are you grateful for? And every day I would write the same thing. And every day I'm thinking, this is dumb, this is dumb, this is dumb. This is doing nothing. And I'm writing the same darn thing. I must be doing it wrong. It doesn't work for me. And then one day I was walking my dog, as I always do, and something made me look up in the sky. And I noticed how blue the sky was. And I thought, wow, is it always that blue? Or did I just not notice? And I got excited and I thought, oh, you know what? Tomorrow morning, I have something new to write in my journal. I am going to write about this beautiful sky. And things like that started happening. All of a sudden, it was subconscious. It wasn't, I was not looking for it because, by 11 in the morning, I forgot about the gratitude journal. And I started paying more attention to all the things that were in my life the whole time. There was a girl at Walgreens, because I was always going to get medication for my husband. Like every other day I was there, and we would always chat, and we shared like a Fitbit challenge. And I walked out and realized, how lucky am I? I love seeing this woman, and it's so nice that, I'm part of the community. Like, I noticed the trees and all the things that were there. And that is when it hit me what this whole gratitude thing was all about, because we're so stuck in our routine and our day-to-day, in the stressors and all the things. It's like you can't pick your head up. And this helps you stop and appreciate and live in the present moment and realize how much in your life and going on around you that you really have to be grateful for. And it changes who you are, because it literally does make you a more joyful person.
It absolutely does bring you so much joy. It is so wonderful that you're talking about that. Debbie, in closing, I want to thank you for sharing your inspiring story and offering all of us a framework to help others thrive through life's challenge. I could not agree more that it is never too late to take control of your future, reclaim your joy, and create meaningful change, even in the face of grief and major transitions. And girl, you are doing it. And it's so terrific that you are, and that you're a role model for this. My heartfelt thank you for joining the Unreads and Rebirth podcast today. And I truly wish you many abundant blessings.
Thank you so much, Irene. It's been an absolute pleasure, and the same to you.
Thank you. To be continued, I hope.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.